Welcome back to the show. In recent news, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was convicted last Tuesday on all counts in the death of George Floyd. The death of George Floyd drawing widespread outrage last May after a video circulated online showing Derek Chauvin holding his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck on a Minneapolis street corner for more than 9 minutes. Well, joining us now to share more details is the Associate Editorial Page Editor of the New York Post, Michael Benjamin, who will join us talking about this, as well as New York City mayoral election. And Mike, good to have you.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you. Happy spring.
Hey, happy spring. I mean, just a little while ago, it was pretty cold. I mean, you never know what to expect in spring, but we're here and a lot to talk about. First of all, let's go back to last week, talk about the conviction of Derek Chauvin, something that hasn't been seen, where a police officer has been convicted at that level without even using a deadly weapon, but certainly his knee, deadly force.
Yes, deadly force uncalled for. It was recorded on video. It was shared around the nation, around the world. The guy was caught red-handed doing something he shouldn't have done. Mr. Floyd was already detained. He was no longer resisting arrest. There was no need to keep his knee on his neck, compressing his airway and preventing him from properly breathing. And the Minneapolis jury, they did their job. They were fair and impartial. They followed the evidence. They followed what the prosecutors offered. They listened to the reasonable doubt that was raised by Chauvin's attorney, and they decided that the facts fit the charges, that Chauvin was guilty of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter in this case. I think they did the right thing in listening to what was presented. I mean, you had a testimony of a firefighter who happened by the scene and offered her assistance to make sure that Mr. Floyd, would not lose his life. They refused her assistance, and she testified tearfully. You had other officers who testified. You had the police chief testifying that what Chauvin did was not in keeping with the use of force or any standard procedures that police department actually encourages and practices. So you had his own colleagues in law enforcement as first responders saying what Chauvin did was beyond the bounds and should not have happened. And the jury listened to them, listened to the medical examiner, and they didn't think any of the defense witnesses or experts or those who were claiming that because of his past drug use or his possibly having used drugs prior to the incident contributed to his passage. It didn't matter. He died because of compression to his neck, and he could no longer breathe, and he died. That's what happened, and the jury found that to be the case.
1 week later, in your reflections, talk to me about what does this actually mean for people in communities of color?
One, you're seeing changes in police department procedures. I mean, they're all across the nation have been put on notice. Legislatures and city councils and other leaders are pressing the police to change their behavior towards people of color when it comes to their arrest and the use of force. And you're seeing juries are not just believing cops anymore. They're seeing actual videotape evidence of what transpired and are making sound judgments based on the evidence. You had recently last week the North Carolina police officer who shot the motorist he had detained in the back. His own body cam showed what transpired, and it contradicted the lie he told investigators that the guy he shot had taken his taser and tried to use it against him. That was not the case. So you had his lie contradicted by his own video evidence. And when he tried to have an appeal, the judge says, it is what it is. You're guilty. And there's nothing your lawyers did that prevented you from having a fair trial. I think you're going to see this across the country, this sort of thing happening. One of the things we also missed was that about 2 years ago, another Minneapolis police officer had shot a woman, and he was fired and tried and convicted. So it's not as though it's something that's entirely unusual in the last couple of years when you have these kind of high-profile cases and justice being done. I think African Americans, other people of color, can finally see some measure of justice coming when it comes to bad encounters with police officers who have acted with ill intent.
Let's turn to the local front and switch our news now to politics as we see New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. We've got a mayoral race going on. We got somebody who's going to take his place, possibly. What's going on?
Well, the latest poll that came out last week with New York One, where they actually did all the way through ranked choice voting, because now this year voters are not just voting for their favorite; they're asked to vote for their top five in rank order. And so that as you go through the round, if nobody gets 50% plus one on the first go through, then you go through the votes that, let's say, the number eight person in the race, who was his voter's second choice and third choice. Those votes are then assigned to the remaining candidates until somebody gets 50% plus one. And in the New York One poll, Andrew Yang was number one, followed by, I believe, Eric Adams, followed by Scott Stringer. And when they played it out through, I believe, 7 rounds of voting through using ranked choice voting, Andrew Yang beats Scott Stringer 57% to 43%. And this was a poll of likely Democratic voters. So it's something that's good for Yang, but it's also something that's good for Stringer, knowing that he is the second choice for many voters, so they can adjust their campaigns accordingly. This week, Scott Stringer got the endorsement of the UFT. Eric Adams got the endorsement the week before of the fire officers and other unions. It's beginning to play itself out, and unions are now being smart. They're also selecting their first, second, and third choices. I believe the Working Families Party selected Scott Stringer as their first choice, followed by Maya Wiley, followed by Diane Morales, and then followed by Maya Wiley as their top 3 choices that their membership has said they'd like to see, in the position of hopefully getting elected mayor. So it's gonna be an interesting race, and I would urge voters in the Bronx and across the city to fill out their ballots 1 through 5, because that way you'll have a voice in whoever gets elected mayor. At least your top 5 choices have an opportunity of becoming mayor. If not your first choice, then the person who you think is the second choice, who'd be just as good, wins the race, and you still have a voice and an involvement in who becomes the next mayor.
When you talk about ranked choice voting, a lot of New Yorkers are still up in arms. I mean, it's been decided, but the fact of the matter is there's still a lot of opposition to ranked choice voting. Any chance this will be a one and done?
No, because it's in the city charter, and voters had a chance 2 years ago to vote on it, and they voted in favor of overwhelmingly. Members, elected officials, union leaders, they somehow didn't manage to voice their opinions then. And now that it's coming into fruition, they want to say, well, you got to stop this. This is not a good idea. Well, voters already decided. It's in the city charter. Now, what can happen is the new city council in 2022, they can vote to change the ranked choice voting law. But since many of them were elected under ranked choice voting, I doubt they're going to change it. And so I don't see much of a movement to do away with it. I think it's something that's new. You learn how to use it, and it works. I mean, in the Bronx, we just had a special election where ranked choice voting was used to select the successor in the city council to Richie Torres. Osvaldo Feliz won, I believe through 7 rounds, he wound up being the winner. And I believe over in the 11th council district, Eric Dinowitz was elected to city council to replace a member who left to become a judge.
Can't let you go without talking about the borough of the Bronx. We've got a borough president race that is heating up highly. How do you see things going? We've got Councilmember Fernando Cabrera. Many people consider him to be the front runner. You got Natalia Fernandez, Assemblywoman over there, and then also you got Councilwoman Vanessa Gibson, they're considered the big 3. Am I right about that?
You're right. No, they're the big 3. They're the ones that have the greatest chance of winning, who have some experience. Fernando Cabrera has been a councilman for 2 terms or more. He's got a shot, but if you look at his record outside of running for the city council, he's lost his previous races. He lost his 2 races in an attempt to run for state senate, and I'm not quite sure how exactly he's doing for borough president. I know that Fernandez and Gibson have been working hard, accumulating endorsements both from community members as well as unions. Gibson appears to be the strongest in getting endorsements across the board and working very hard and being out in the public. It's going to be an interesting race. I know Gibson has, the desire to become, the first African-American elected Bronx borough president. We'll see what happens. She seems to have made inroads with many communities across the borough. And with ranked choice voting, it's anybody's ball game. But the harder you work and the more alliances you make, voters might decide, well, you might not be my first choice, but you're my second choice. And that might be enough to get somebody over the finish line in the first 3 or 4 or 5 rounds, depending on how many candidates there are for borough president. But you're right, they are the top 3. But I would rank it as far as who looks to be in the lead. I would say it's Gibson, Fernandez, and Cabrera.
Wow. Okay. Interesting to see. We'll see how it goes from here. Michael Benjamin, thank you so much for being with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
All righty. Now, if you want more information, please continue to follow Michael on Twitter at SquarePegDem. Again, SquarePegDem. That's where you can find Michael on Twitter. And of course, we encourage you to stay connected to him at the New York Post, but also we need you to stay connected with us right here at Open. We're going to take a quick break. We got more show coming up right after this.